If you have your note sheet, get ready. We're going to take some notes. You're going to put some things down on there, fill in some blanks. Nearly every marriage starts the same way, with a guy and a girl staring at each other with doughy eyes, and they're smiling from ear to ear, and everybody's standing around them just like, wow, they're so in love. This is so beautiful. This is so wonderful. Nearly every marriage starts the same way, and if a marriage doesn't start that way, I'm wondering how it's going to go. But at the very least, they start that way. And one of the key things about the ceremony are these vows, these promises that get made one to another. And the guy makes a promise to the girl, and the girl makes a promise to the guy. And some couples use ancient vows. And it's a few lines of just saying the for better, for worse, richer, for poorer kinds of things. Some couples write their own vows. Some make sure that the vow the wife says to the husband and the vow the husband says to the wife are exactly the same. But sometimes you find the greatest beauty when the vows expressed also express the uniqueness of the person who's giving them and the person who's receiving them. The video we just saw is a video from a guy by the name of Mystery Guitar Man. He's a YouTube dude, and about a year ago, I watched his proposal through YouTube because it's YouTube. We're voyeurs. All of us are into this. I like to look at other people's lives and try to imagine what's going on. Well, this last week, he posted his marriage video, and so I chopped it down in some little bits, and I was amazed at something. I was amazed at the artfulness and the craftsmanship in the vows they gave to each other. I want to highlight them for you this morning. Sarah said one thing, and Joe said something slightly different. She said, I promise to be patient during our challenges because through them we'll emerge stronger. Joe said, on the other hand, I promise to guide us through our challenges because there's nothing we cannot face if we are together. In some measure, that's far more beautiful than if they had said the same promise to each other. That if they say the different things, then it begins to make sense and it begins to produce harmony. It begins to be wonderful. Just imagine what it would have been like if both of them said, I promise to guide us through our challenges. And then the next person says, no, I promise to guide us through our challenges. And the first person says, now, well, hold on, I said it first. So how would that doesn't work so well? Or if they both decided they were just going to be patient, so one says, I promise to be patient through whatever challenge we face. And the other person says, I promise also to be patient through whatever challenge we face. In fact, let's just not do anything. Let's just be patient all the time and wait around and see what happens. But there's beauty in the differences. They changed the promises up a little bit a second time in their vows. She says, I promise to be your partner in all things, not possessing you, but working with you as part of the whole. And he says, I promise to be your best friend, not controlling you, but working with you as part of the whole. And what this expresses for them is that they're each aware of their own weaknesses. They're each aware of their own skills. Yeah, he says, I'm going to guide. She says, I'm going to be patient. But they're each aware of their own weaknesses. Her weakness in this case is that she might be inclined to possess, to try to keep for herself who he is, to try to restrict and restrain. And he, at the same time, might feel the temptation to control, to dominate, to be in charge. And so in their promises, they specifically say, I'm not going to do that. What I know I'm prone to do, I'm not going to do. There's something profoundly beautiful when two different people come together and fuse their lives together into one uniquely new and different thing. In fact, there's almost something spiritual about it. Because this two becoming one in a marriage relationship is, in some sense, touching on an aspect of God that we don't understand, that we can't understand. It's beyond us. But in fact, God himself exists as three in one. He's a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Somehow all equal, somehow all distinct, somehow all God. God somehow internally by himself is three and yet one at the same time. It's a mystery, we don't understand it, and the marriage relationship can't perfectly mimic it or image it, but yet there's something about it that does. this two becoming one, represents God in a way that just about nothing else can. A verse of scripture we looked at last week is Genesis 1:27. It says this, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them." And we learned last week that there's something about the image of God that requires the male and the female. And there's something about male and female that together image the image of God more accurately. And so to culminate all of God's creation, he created everything. Then he created human beings, and he started with Adam. Then he made the woman, and then he created marriage. And the last thing God made was marriage. The crowning achievement of all that he made before he said it's time to rest was to bring a man and a woman together and to create this one new thing out of two. Well, based on that, I want to ask the question this morning. Our society tells us certain things about marriage. It tells us that marriage is all about fulfillment. You know, the guy and the girl, the two people come together and they fulfill each other. Dr. Phil would say the best marriages are the ones where you meet her needs and she meets your needs and so on. Sometimes people think marriage is about fulfillment. Sometimes they think marriage is about happiness. And so they'll spend millions of dollars, billions of dollars perhaps in this country to try to go to counseling and to try to buy books and to try to watch different television shows that try to deal with this kind of stuff on how to have a happy marriage. You know, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. How do you have a happy marriage? Do the 5 love languages, things like that. But what if marriage isn't about happiness? What if it's not about fulfillment? What if ultimately marriage has a different purpose? What if the God who created human beings has a purpose for bringing them together into a marriage union? Well, if God has a purpose for marriage, then you can know a couple things. Number one, you can know that if I live that purpose, I'll experience greater fulfillment, even if fulfillment isn't the purpose. If I live the purpose, I'll experience greater joy and happiness, even if joy and happiness aren't the purpose. And so what we need to do is try to identify what's the purpose so that we can live in it. Now, I know some of you this morning here are married and some of you aren't married. Some of you are engaged and you're preparing to be married. Some of you aren't. Some of you were engaged in the past and you're not engaged now. And some of you were married in the past and you're not married now. And there's all kinds of different circumstances across this room. So what I want to do is I just want to let you all know that I think there's aspects of this that applies to everybody in at least 2 different ways. If you're single today, then there are 2 ways this message could apply to you. Number one of these days you might be married. And you should understand the purpose of marriage before you even go down that journey. You should understand what marriage is all about before you even take a step in that direction. Secondarily, maybe you will never be married. Maybe God's will for you is that you remain single for the rest of your life. We're going to talk about that specifically next week. We're going to talk about the privilege of singleness and the blessings God gives to people who are in that vein. And maybe you're in that vein. And even if you are single for life, there's a part of this message that speaks to you too, and it's this. You know married people. And I want you, as single individuals who know married people, to uphold them in your prayers and to lift them up face to face, in person and in prayer, to say, God, would you build in their relationship what they should be, what they need to be? So, even if you're single today, I need you to hear this, pay attention to this so that you can understand where you fit into this process. But the rest of this is geared primarily towards married people. God has a purpose for marriage. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dig into some Bible passages to get some hints. And then at the end of our time, I'm going to try to pull it together into what is God's purpose, biblically speaking, for marriage. Our first hint comes from Genesis chapter 2. I've printed the whole passage there, but let me give you the blanks first. Our first hint is this: marriage expresses authority and unity. Marriage expresses authority and unity. Now, before you go too far with that, let's read the passage and see what it means. Genesis 2, 23 through 25, this is printed on your note sheet. It says this: the man said, after God brings this woman to him, he's taken the rib out, he made the woman, he brings the woman to the man, and the man says, Adam says, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. As a child, that last line confused me, but at the same time, it made me wonder, what does it mean to be naked and not be ashamed of that? That was weird. Well, that's what's happening here. That's what these guys were. Okay, so what I want to draw your attention to is a couple things. One is that authority is present in this place. First of all, if you know the context of Genesis chapter 2, God made Adam. God put Adam in the garden. God gave Adam this rule that said, don't eat from that tree. And this other command that says, freely eat from everything else and tend for everything and care for everything. Okay? So Adam exists first. Then God brings all these animals in front of him, and Adam names all these animals. And so God gives Adam the authority over these animals, and to symbolize that, he's giving them all names. And then God specially creates this woman for Adam. And Adam gives her a name. There are a couple hints at this authority thing. Number one, Adam existed first. Number two, God made the woman from him and for him. Number three, Adam gives her a name so that he actually says, this is woman. So he's identifying her as a name. You get these hints of authority, but don't run too far with that just yet, because you have to see the other side of this. See, she was made from him, but Adam looks at her and he says, this is bone of my bone. There's something like me in her. We're together. We're connected. One more thing that hints at authority, it says that the man is the one who leaves his father and mother, who are his authority. Now he no longer has an authority over him in the form of his mother and father. He leaves his mother and father, and then he is the agent or the initiator or the person who begins this process of being united to the wife. But then they become one. See, it's an amazing blend of this concept that, yeah, maybe there's an authority thing going on here, but there's also a unity thing going on here. We don't understand that in our society because we've never seen a person experience unity and authority at the same time. We get kind of hints at it. So, for example, the coach of a sports team. The coach of a sports team definitely has authority, but he doesn't have unity with the